Greetings, YouTube. First up, I'd like to say that Hancock, starring Will Smith, Charlize Theron, and Jason Bateman, is quite possibly my favorite superhero movie. I think it really nails the whole idea of what happens when there's a real superhero in the world, and how does that relate to the world at large, and how does that superhero themselves relate to the world. And Will Smith, I think, put in one of his best roles. I realize it didn't make huge amounts of money at the box office, but I've watched it multiple times and I've enjoyed it every one. I have not found a DVD copy that has commentary. I don't know if there is one out there. If there is and someone could tell me where to get one, I'd appreciate that. But I found myself thinking about the movie at work last night. And that's why this video is going to be called a movie pondering. I'm just thinking about the movie. And if you think about what this movie says below the surface, I think it's interesting. First of all, it's proof that gods exist. It's proof that magic exists. Because without the gods and magic, neither Hancock nor his female counterpart, played by Charlize Theron, Mary, would exist. Though we never learned her original name, I doubt it was Mary originally. They're thousands of years old. Who knows what it was originally? And she never tells him what his is. I thought that was interesting. She lets him just use the name John Hancock. Also, he eats and he drinks and is affected by chemicals, alcohol. Now, it takes large quantities of alcohol to affect him. He's guzzling it like it's going out of style. But that would mean he's affected by poison. You'd think that someone who wanted to take Hancock out would have taken advantage of that at some point. Because let's face it, Hancock isn't particularly bright. I don't think he'd be that difficult to confuse. Now, I found it interesting that Hancock, who is essentially a blank slate after he wakes up in a hospital, becomes a hero. Not a particularly good hero, but his intentions are in the right place. Becomes a hero fighting crime. Whereas Mary, who knows exactly what she is, does nothing. She remains in hiding. She's a super being, capable of doing things far beyond the ken of mortal men, and yet she does nothing. Now, you could say that she's done lots of things in the past, and maybe she's earned a break, and maybe you're right. But as the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility, and she has great power. And while Hancock bumbles around and tries to do things, at least he's trying to do things. Now you can say, well, maybe she doesn't have much interest in humanity. Well, she has enough interest in humanity as an individual to have a husband and a son. She has a relationship that benefits her, even though she's not using her abilities to help the world at large. So she has self-interest, perhaps even be viewed as enlightened self-interest. But her altruism doesn't seem to be very high, whereas Hancock's altruism is high. He wants to help. He wants to be useful. And when Jason Bateman's character helps him focus himself and show him that he can be useful, that he can be a better man, he becomes the hero he always wanted to be. I also like the little things in the film, the way he carves eagles into the walls of a prison, the way he shaves with scraping at his face with his fingernails. The casual way they showed him just like moving a door. No rut, it was just, and you just go through it. Because for Hancock, that was absolutely nothing. That was nothing not to be concerned about in the least. His willingness to go into a prison that he does not have to stay in, simply to reevaluate himself and to change the way the world perceives him. But at the end of the film, he's a real bona fide hero living on the East Coast so that he's far away from his counterpart Mary, who's on the West Coast. But the world knows he's a hero. I guess potentially the world still doesn't know that Mary's a hero. But she still remains in hiding, and she still doesn't use her abilities. And while it's really great that Hancock is a hero fighting crime and such, would his abilities be put better to use, say, doing special operations for the U.S. government, or any government? Think how many special operations tasks have gone awry. How many people we have lost. How many individuals that weren't captured but were killed. How many of those could have turned out better if you had a Hancock doing them for you? Think how many secrets could have been found. And since Hancock does have a moral compass, I think he would not do things that would be considered immoral. I think, in fact, asking Hancock to do something he considered immoral would probably be a really bad idea. He's not quite Superman. He's not quite the Boy Scout. But he definitely has a code. And you really don't want to insult him. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was very well done. It was interesting that ordinary people were shown to be a threat to the world at large around Hancock. That the characters all had texture and depth. I didn't think there were any real throwaway characters in this film. Another part of the film I enjoyed. There was a texture to it, a context to the world that I really could feel and believe that it was a real place. It wasn't cartoony, even though Hancock was a superhero. So these are the thoughts I had about Hancock, a movie that most people may have not even heard of. I'll link to the IMDb page. But I enjoyed it, and it's got me thinking. And any movie that gets me thinking and gives me enjoyment on top of it, to my mind, is definitely worth your time. So if you haven't seen Hancock, go see it. Go watch it. And tell me, do you agree with what I have said here? Do you see my assessment as being on point, or if I left the reservation? I'm interested in hearing what you have to say.